Hello everyone and welcome. This is the first Masterworks of our 2023-2024 season, and I couldn't be more excited to present to you two works by Russian composers. This program begins with a piano concerto by Sergei Rachmaninoff. Rachmaninoff wrote his theme, his very famous Variations on a Theme by Paganini in 1934. This was, in fact, his very last work for piano and orchestra. It was first performed by the Philadelphia Orchestra with Leopold Stokowski conducting and Rachmaninoff himself at the piano. He wrote this during the summer in his villa in Lucerne, quite a bucolic and beautiful setting, perfect place for this incredible music. Now, Rachmaninoff himself left Russia in 1917, and he wasn't allowed back in until 1933-34. So this was the piece that really sort of brought him back in to be able to share his music with the Russian public. He wrote this set of variations. It's a set of 24 variations, and it's based on the Caprice for solo violin number 24 by Niccolò Paganini. Niccolò Paganini, at the beginning of the 19th century, was one of the most famous violin soloists, and he was a composer. And he composed music that was so difficult, only he could play it. He was really incredible. And I have to say at this point that both he and Rachmaninoff had that in common. Rachmaninoff was well known for the gigantic size of his hands and being able to play huge numbers of notes at the same time with his hands. And Paganini had a very similar feel in terms of what he could do on a violin. Well, this 24th Caprice, which is, by the way, very popular, it's the one that goes dun da 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 dim ba 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 bum da 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 dee dum. You've heard it, I know. It's been used by composers far and wide for years and years, but probably the most important and famous setting is this set of variations by Rachmaninoff. Now, he does 24 different variations, but the 24 variations are set up into 3 blocks, so it almost feels like a 3-movement concerto like you would expect. He also incorporates a different tune, a very famous tune, the Dies Irae tune. Now, this is a tune that was originally Gregorian chant, and it was the Day of Wrath. It's the tune that's dee da dee da dee da dum, and he uses that in addition to the yum da da dee da dim da da dee dee dum da dee theme, and you'll hear those two going back and forth throughout the piece. Each of the variations has its own personality, but it's really number 18 that probably is the most popular and the one that you may be most familiar with. Dee da 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 dum da 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 dum. Incredibly beautiful, so beautiful. In fact, it was used as the theme music for the movie Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour. Now, performing this work with us is the incomparable Hélène Lefebvre, pianist who was with us in 2017 as he performed work by André Mathieu. You may remember a most incredible performance. Well, he is an incredibly profound musician and person. I love speaking with him. He's one of those people that when I get to talk to him, I feel like somehow I've learned more and feel differently about the world around me. I want to share a bit of what I just recently learned from him as he spoke to me from his home.
You and me, when we go on the stage to do the performance, we're not in Windsor, we are not in New York, we're not in Paris, we're not in London. We're the two of us in a bubble with the wonderful orchestra, and we make something great and much greater than us. We're just tools for something that maybe the public will receive as something that will be good for their soul, for their heart, and sometimes some people who have disease. How many people I know that have been not cured but have been helped by listening to Jean-Sébastien Bach? How many people do I know? I've worked a lot with trisomic, with autistic people, and I know that the result I do have by telling them, why don't you listen to Carl Philippe Emmanuel Bach symphony? And there's, dum, bum, pa, 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 pum, pa, pa. So do we need to be great and to be star? No. When we do this art of classical music, we need to give of ourselves the gift for the people to be moved and to be healed of the society we're living in.
So when you have a piece of music that has 24 short movements or these variations, it's really quite tricky to sort of make the whole piece work. You have to pick the right tempos and the right tempo comparisons, and it all has to work just right in order for you, the audience, to feel the shape from beginning to end. Hélène recently told me how he approaches that topic.
I believe that the way Rachmaninoff built this piece make this particularly piece as a gem. It's like every variation have to be played with a lot of respect by the tempo. You know, tam pa da ba da da da. It never have to be too fast. So now I will I will be very polite. When sometimes you hear some, and they play that like they have to go to the bathroom as soon as possible. You're not obliged. I remember when I did the recording of Picture and Exhibition, few of the critics were very mean to me. They were saying, Alain Lefebvre play the Picture of an Exhibition, the theme, too slow. So one day I was in a radio show and the guy was very aggressive with me. And as I said to you before, having been beaten, it's difficult for me, but I'm able to answer. And I said, do you know the story of Picture and Exhibition? He says, yes, yes, yes. And I said, do you know that it's Mussorgsky going to see the Victor Hartmann exhibition and is walking from one painting to another painting? So I said, when you go to an exhibition, do you run from one painting to another painting or you walk? And he said, I said, why do we have today to play so fast? What do we have to prove? Horowitz did play so fast. We have Argerich who spend our lives playing fast and loud. So we don't need that. And I will not impress anyone by being faster. So maybe you and me, when we will start to work together, you will be a little bit amazed with my tempi. You will say, oh, okay. But, when the tempi is right, for the ears, it seems very logical. So today, as we're talking, there's a lot of illogical music that happen. Music has to be logical. It's mathematical. So I'm not in this rhapsody on a theme of Paganini to prove my technique, and of course it's a difficult one. There's a couple of variations. They're they're killers. So you have to go to the aspect that Rachmaninoff was very cool. And the last thing, okay, I did play the four concerto of Rachmaninoff. I record few of them, but this is probably one of the pieces of Rachmaninoff where the love story between the conductor, the orchestra, and the pianist is the most important. I don't know if you agree with me, but I think that.
My conversation with Hélène naturally takes us to the other piece that's on this program. The piece is entitled Pictures at an Exhibition, and it was written by Modest Mussorgsky in 1874, another Russian composer. Now, Modest Mussorgsky composed this piece of music for solo piano, and it was inspired by the artwork of a friend of his named Victor Hartmann. Victor Hartmann had just passed away prematurely at a young age, but his work was really well known by many in Russia, including Modest Mussorgsky. And the way this piece works is that there are 20 tableaus or musical pictures that describe the works of art by Victor Hartmann. Interspersed with those 10 tableaus or pictures, musical pictures, are 5 promenades or walks between them. So imagine that you're at the Art Gallery of Windsor, the Arts Windsor Essex, or the DIA across the river, and you're slowly looking at a piece of art and then walking across to the next one, bit by bit by bit. And that will give you the idea of the shape of this piece. Now, you may be saying to yourself, but it's for solo piano, how does that work? Well, in the 1920s, in 1922, Serge Koussevitzky, the great conductor of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, called up, wrote to his friend Maurice Ravel, the French composer, and said, "This piece by Modeste Mussorgsky is so colorful and so interesting. Would you, Maurice Ravel, consider orchestrating it for full orchestra?" What that means is that Ravel took the piano part and the piano piece and arranged it for the entire orchestra to play. The reason that Koussevitzky chose Ravel as the orchestrator is because Ravel had already a reputation for writing music that was incredibly colorful and using many instruments in many interesting and different ways. And so it was the perfect combination. In fact, I will tell you that after this was premiered in 1922 by the Boston Symphony Orchestra, this piece immediately went into the standard repertoire. And what really became popular was the solo work by Modeste Mussorgsky, Pictures at an Exhibition, a piece which had not been performed that much before the arrangement, but afterwards, pianists everywhere wanted to perform it. So, what 10 paintings will you expect to hear and see in your mind as you hear this piece of music being performed on stage? Well, it begins with the first movement called Gnomes. In this, the gnome is actually a nutcracker. And so you kind of get this image of this nutcracker gnome kind of character. The second movement is called The Old Castle, and it is an old Italian castle, and standing outside of the castle is a troubadour who's singing of his love for the princess inside the castle. In order to achieve that, what Ravel uses is as an alto saxophone as the solo instrument, the solo voice. Alto saxophone is not a typical instrument that you hear in a symphony orchestra, and so that color is really unique. That's followed by the Tuileries, which are children that are playing or arguing, it's hard to tell exactly which, sometimes it's a little of both, in a French garden. Following that is the fourth movement called Bidlo, and that is a wagon with two large wheels that's being pulled by ox. And so you can imagine it being pulled slowly kind of through the mud. This movement features a solo tuba. Now that in and of itself is pretty unique, but it's rather high tuba writing. So usually the tuba player chooses to play it on a shrunk tuba called a euphonium. So you'll hear that in this performance. Following that is a sketch that Victor Hartmann made called The Ballet of the Unhatched Chicks. And he made the sketch of these uniforms that these dancers would wear that were kind of half eggshell, with the top of their heads being the other half of the eggshell, and their heads popping out like young chicks would do. Following that is a movement called Samuel Goldenberg and Shmuel. These are two paintings of a rich man and a poor man. In this piece, there is a trumpet solo that I want to point out. Now, the trumpet player is asked to put a mute in the trumpet, which deadens the sound, then asked to play as loud as he or she possibly can through the instrument, creating quite a compressed and pushed kind of sound. It's a very unique color, and it's what Ravel was known for, creating these interesting colors and sound. Following that is Limoges, or the marketplace, and this is where people are getting together, sort of gossiping and talking to each other. That is followed by movement number 8, which is the catacombs. In it, there are 3 people exploring the catacombs in Paris. The way that he describes this sort of low area with this sort of heavy darkness and dampness is he uses huge blocks of sound, brass, woodwinds, and strings, and they sort of go back and forth with each other. The penultimate movement, the second to last movement, is called Baba Yaga, and that's a description of the witch who lives in a hut that is built on chicken legs, and it is actually was a clock that Victor Hartmann had designed, and it really captured Mussorgsky's imagination. The finale of this piece is called The Great Gate of Kiev. And this was a competition that Hartmann entered in which he designed a gate that would be placed at one of the entrance points of the city of Kiev in the Ukraine. Now, it was never built, but he did really well in the competition. In fact, he won the competition. They loved it. And this huge arch was the inspiration for this piece of music. I know you're going to love this deep dive into some of the greatest Russian music ever written, with the Rachmaninoff variations on a theme by Paganini, followed by Pictures at an Exhibition by Modeste Mussorgsky and arranged by Maurice Ravel. Enjoy.